And we're live.
Hello, everybody.
Good evening and welcome to the Smart Elections Election Protection Forum. I'm Lulu Friesdat. I'm the Executive Director of Smart Elections.
And I'm Bennie Smith, Shelby County Election Commissioner and Senior White House Correspondent for Smart Elections.
I'm Lulu Friesdat. I'm the Executive Director of Smart Elections.
And I'm Bennie.
Wow, we had a bit of a feedback loop there. Sorry about that. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I said I was a Senior White House Correspondent. It sounded good when I heard it back.
Sorry about that. I had my playback on because I was checking it right before we started. Okay, so hey, thank you so much for being here. And let's just look in the comments, say hello, make sure that we have some people here with us. If you're here, go ahead and just put something into the comments so we know
Say what state you're from.
Yeah, sure. Or how excited you are to be here. We're going to be talking about Board of Election reform. It is so necessary, so needed, so long overdue in so many of our boards of elections. I will say there are so many election workers who work hard and are incredibly talented and skilled, and we love them. Hey, Lon, thanks for being here. And we've had any number of election commissioners and former election commissioners on this show, Virginia Martin and Dwight Shellman and Tina Barton, and they all do amazing work and they're professionals, and we respect them and are really in awe of their competence and their dedication. However, there is a lot of territory with, throughout the country where that is just not happening, where we are not seeing competence, and we need to address it and look it square in the face and see what we can do about it. And it really ties back into election security because I'm just going to see if I can totally eliminate that echo. It really ties back into election security. We're still having an echo. Bennie, can you turn your mic down? Try that. I think that'll address it. Can you still hear me? Okay, great, super. So competence really ties back into security, because if you don't have competence, you don't have people with the technical skills and the know-how to really establish security. So Board of Election reform, Board of Election competence, and security and accuracy in elections, even accessibility for elections, all of the issues that we're really focused on and working so hard for, they all go hand in hand. Hey, Kelly, Geraldine, Laura's here, Mark, fantastic. So Steve, terrific. So excited to see all of you and really, really appreciative that you're here and joining us. So the show, the forum, as usual, I think is going to be really exciting. We're going to show clips from some of the hearings that took place here in New York that were pretty explosive. The things that people spoke about were very revealing. And we're going to talk to Bennie about how the Board of Elections work in Memphis, Tennessee, where he's a commissioner. And then we have a guest, Kate Doran, who is a League of Women Voters election specialist. And we're also really excited to have her here. So I'm going to go ahead and play a clip to get started so you can kind of get a sense, these hearings, just what people spoke about. And this went on for about 3 hours, people speaking with really blunt honesty about the concerns they had about the elections.
Good morning.
Okay, so I have to put this.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me first welcome everyone to the New York State Senate Standing Committee on Elections public hearing on election administration and voting rights. We will be having a series of these hearings throughout the state, but of course we are starting in Brooklyn, in central Brooklyn, and in Senate District 20.
I'm actually a constituent in your district, Senator Myrie. I worked the midterm election in Weeksville, Brooklyn. I live in Lefferts Gardens. And I thought at the time that what I experienced was just a fluke. I now understand that these types of occurrences are completely normal. Both of our scanners were broken for the majority of the day, and we had unprecedented turnout, a line out the door. We had literally hundreds of emergency ballots, such that the box was filled and we were having people voting put their ballot into a bag that would be used for something else at the end of the day. It would take a lot for me as a voter to have faith in a system where I am dropping my ballot in a glorified garbage bag after waiting in line for 40 minutes. Since that election, I've attended at least 3 training classes and worked several more elections, including the November presidential election and early voting. This unprofessionalism and lack of leadership has been consistent in my experience, whether it's in the training or while working the actual elections. Me and my colleagues have been screamed at by trainers and given misinformation on more than one occasion during classes and while actually working on election day. Additionally, in that experience, our ballot marking device was broken for almost the entire day, which meant that any voter with disability would not have been served by the site. This is not the first time that I've experienced this at a polling site. I can't imagine that is legal in any way. I think one of the issues that has been recognized by everyone is that the cronyism is truly rampant within the ranks at the Board of Elections, and that the sort of tension that runs between the parties and the Board of Elections creates a conflict that puts the poll worker in the middle. So while we advertise, or we see advertisements for $2,800 to work all of the early voting shifts on election day, it's actually, you're actually dependent on your district leader to assign you to the class to be able to work the early elections or the early voting days. So it's not as easily done to earn that money or to show up for that civic duty. It's something that's advertised as needed, particularly during the pandemic, but you actually have to jump through a number of hoops to be able to do that at all. The real problem is the parties shouldn't have this much power in running the election, and people shouldn't be doing jobs they likely aren't qualified to be doing, and especially jobs with as much power and importance as being a district leader, which is elected and unpaid. It doesn't surprise me. It shocked me to find out that it was unpaid, but doesn't surprise me how much cronyism is there given how much power these folks have, as well as the commissioners and others. Perhaps if the city of Brooklyn wasn't constantly trying to band-aid all of the issues that are popping up as a result of the structure of the election leadership, some of the larger issues that are occurring would be able to be fixed because there would be a refocusing of energy. For example, I think you could easily glean data after each election regarding the number of folks who checked in for early voting and which ED80 they are coming from, which would allow us to then use this data to predict for future elections what the turnout might be on election day at a specific voting site, and then distribute resources in a more equitable way so that you don't have folks in Weeksville waiting in line outside with not enough scanners while 40 election day workers in Park Slope are just sitting around, both of which I have seen happen. Perhaps election day workers could be assigned by a single election governing body and it'd be done by geography, which might help with the insane level of absenteeism. The quality, professionalism, and commitment to the training of workers and coordinators needs to be significantly raised to match the sheer importance of serving the voters and protecting the right to vote. If we boil this whole job as an election day worker down to the $250 it pays and make the responsibility commensurate with what is roughly $14.70 an hour, then of course serving the voters and protecting their rights is the furthest thing from what is happening. We are New Yorkers. Our right to vote should not feel this precarious.
So I got to take that one off. Okay. Wow. Every time I hear that, it still kind of stuns me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you think about that, Bennie?
Yeah, I like it. She's pretty matter of fact. I think it's kind of the elephant in the room now, and people who work these elections who have some responsibility and the intelligence, they need to start speaking out more.
And one of the things when you and I were kind of chatting about this before the forum, you said that things are actually pretty similar in Memphis County, where you're an election commissioner, and that there's basically appointments based on partisan loyalty, and that it really creates a lot of dysfunction. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the construct of, legislature sets how the representation is done per county in Tennessee, based on who's in majority at the state legislature. So your House and your Senate members in Tennessee, we have a Republican majority. So even though Shelby County is a majority Democrat county, the majority party in control is a Republican.
Right. And you're breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure why, but we're getting the gist of that, which is that basically the state is run by Republicans in Tennessee. And what
Right.
you explained to me is that because Republicans control the state legislature, they actually control who has the dominant party in every single county in Tennessee. Is that correct?
Right. We have 95 counties, and each county has a 5-member election commission board. And 3 of those commissioners are Republican, and the administrator by law has to be a Republican in all 95 counties.
In every single county.
In all 95 counties. Yes.
Right. So the state legislature makes sure that every county is run by Republicans, even in Memphis County, where you have a majority of Democrats.
Correct.
Right. And so, and you're one of the Democrat, and then the minority Democrats in the legislature get to appoint those minority proportion, the minority commissioners in each county.
That's correct. So
And
in
that's how-
Shelby County, we have 13 House and Senate members and that are Democrats, and there are only 5 that are Republicans. But because of the state legislature, majority is Republican, then we have more representation or more Republican commissioners that administer our elections. And the elections administrator, which is basically the CEO for elections, is also by law, they have to be a Republican.
Right. So I'm sorry to just sort of kind of dwell on this, but what you have is not just partisan administration, but you have partisan administration by the party that is actually not the majority party in that county. So you literally have Republicans running a Democratic county there in Memphis.
Yeah, the best way it was explained to me is that we are partisan political professionals. And, you know, one would say that it doesn't go in that order, but it kind of does go in that order. Professional is we're going to be professionals at the last stage of the game, not necessarily.
And it's the partisan loyalty that with most of the election commissioners is their dominant loyalty.
Yeah, I mean, you know what the votes are before you kind of know what the votes are before any business is discussed, right?
You told me one of the commissioners voted yes, and then said, "What did we vote on?"
Yeah. One of in my last session, we had a vote, and you know, we voted to certify the presidential election, and one of the commissioners was like, "What are we voting on?" Yeah.
After the vote.
Yeah, we kind of done now. Yeah, he just knew it was yes. I mean, I'm voting yes, you know. Unless he's told to vote no, which isn't to say that that's exactly how it goes, but that's definitely how it's perceived. At least how I perceive it.
And in terms of the competence of the administration, how would you say it affects the competence of the elections being administered?
You know, absolutely. I got into elections from the most cynical view. You know, being jaded and thinking that, you know, elections they had to be great, right? This is a hallmark of democracy. To completely having that shattered, it's like somebody telling you the Bible ain't real. Just having that completely shattered and then having to piece that back together, but then serving as an election official and seeing some of the nuance that goes on in an election and all the problems that can arise, and then coming back to saying you can just completely botch an election through not knowing what to do. And there are a lot of moving pieces, and elections, they cross into so many other different professions. So it's not just election, it's budgeting and finance. It's process improvement, it's planning, it's event planning. It crosses into a lot of different industries and professions, and you cannot expect a basic election administrator to have that much knowledge or experience. So they're woefully underprepared for the task that they have most of the time.
Most of them have no training. What type of training were you required to have?
Me, none. No, I had to lobby to get appointed.
So to be an election commissioner, you were not required to have any actual training.
You know, they look at your resume and no training. But they look at your accomplishments. Like my legislature, they knew who I was. They knew me from demographics. They knew me from turnout. They knew that I was a person that was aware of elections, and I had already been helping with the election commission. But I didn't get elected my first 3 times. I didn't get appointed. I got rejected like 3 times in a row, I think, before I got on. I got covered by Bloomberg and got rejected the next year.
So you kept trying. So we're going to
Yeah.
troubleshoot. I'm sorry we keep having technical difficulties with our broadcast. We're trying to figure out what it is. So I'm going to just mute and have Bennie talk for a little bit. And then, Guy, tell me if that takes care of the mic noise. And then we'll have Bennie do the same.
Yeah, it sound like somebody's on here with a mic that's dragging. And I actually texted you about it because I thought it was you. Maybe it's Mark. Now you're muted.
Bennie, go ahead and mute yourself, and then I'm going to try talking for a little bit, and we'll see if that takes care of the background noise. So people are saying that there's background noise coming from the show, and then I'm going to just talk for a little bit and try to make
Yeah, it
sure.
sounds like a mic is dragging.
I'm going to remove all the videos from the stream, maybe. I'm sorry, I had all this stuff loaded to try to... I tried to preload a bunch of videos so that we could work efficiently. Can Guy, it stopped when you muted yourself, Lulu. Okay, so. I'm gonna mute myself. Bennie, you talk and let people, Laura, tell me if it's still off when I'm muting myself.
Yeah, I got a unidirectional mic, so everything I say, there's no sound that can come from the back of this part. So it's pretty straightforward for mine.
Now it sounds like it's coming from both of us, because they're saying it that we're having static no matter what. I think
Yeah, it sounds like somebody's dragging a cord. I hear that.
Laura said she doesn't hear the static now. I muted a bunch of people and kicked a bunch of video off our stream. So Laura, that you're saying you don't hear any static now. So is that better? Has the noise gone away? Keep talking to us and we'll keep tweaking here.
Somebody has hacked our sound cards.
Probably I just need a new computer, which I'm going to get very shortly. Okay, so we're not getting any feedback. Laura, the last thing I saw is I don't hear any static now. So we're going to keep going. So Bennie, you're saying that there's a lot of skills required and the commissioners often don't have those skills, or there's really no training required whatsoever. And what are some of the problems that you guys have encountered because of that?
You know, everything is by statute. So you have people who've served on boards who can get Robert's Rules of Order, but not necessarily be versed in a budget or understanding how procurement works or how contracts work.
And specifically, what are some of the problems that you've had come up there because of that? What sort of issues?
Processes, right? I'll be I can examine a process and I can see like 1,000 holes because I work in process improvement. I can see that if you like, it's like getting, I'd said in another show, it's like getting in a time machine and going back to the 80s when you see like a government operation. You'll see somebody type something in a spreadsheet, print it out, give it to somebody else to type back into a spreadsheet, then print it out and give it to somebody else to type back into a spreadsheet. It's those type of things that you see that has government really way behind. And, automation is not a known concept in some of those operations. Wow.
Okay, so we're going to listen to another video with some of the problems that they experienced in New York. And I think you're going to hear a lot of issues. And people, go ahead, if you have specific questions or things, bad experiences that you had or good experiences that you had with the Board of Elections or suggestions, go ahead and start putting them into the comments and we'll try to take as many as we can. And I'm going to... we're going to listen to another one of these videos of what happened here in New York. I think this is a pretty good one to listen to.
Is the front line of elections. They're the people who make it a good experience for voters or who make it a terrible experience for voters. In New York City, we have over 1,200 poll sites on Election Day. That means we have between 30,000 and 40,000 poll workers, usually. They are the heart of making elections work, and yet we have very little resources or attention paid to them in election administration. On election day for the primary in June, I ended up being a coordinator for a poll site. There were 9 of us. There should have been 26. I barely had one person for every role, and I had to be a table inspector in addition to being the coordinator. You mentioned earlier that so many people came out to vote, almost a million. And so we had lines all day long. Because we only had enough people for each role, nobody could take a break. I begged the Board of Elections for more poll workers. They were like, we totally understand. Tons of other poll sites don't have enough people as well.
If I understand correctly, you recruited election workers more or less on the spot to fill gaps in the workforce that had been provided by the Board of Elections and trained them on site
Yes.
to work that day. Can you just, I mean, that's both heroic and sort of disturbing that it was necessary.
I think we could have it where we could staff elections with people who are not Republicans or Democrats, who are blanks, who are Working Families Party, who are whatever they want to be. We do that for interpreters, for the accessibility clerks. We could expand that, but that does need legislative help. But I want to put it out there, that will help voters. Democracy takes work, and the workers who practice democracy need help. Thank you.
Patronage and professionalism, ironically, go hand in hand. Party bosses pick loyalists who do not have the skills and qualifications to do the jobs assigned to them. They are there to collect a paycheck. And I have seen this in many aspects of the voting process. But particularly noteworthy is in the absentee ballot process. I was an observer counting absentee ballots last year, and it was very disheartening because there were so many people who were just going through the motions. And as we know from the last several primary elections, counting absentee ballots is absolutely critical. And the process was redundant, inefficient, and very error-prone. And the people performing the tasks were not taking it as seriously as they needed to, and many of them didn't have the skills to execute their responsibilities properly. The other part of the absentee ballot process that touched me individually as a resident of the 20th Senatorial District was that I received one of the mislabeled absentee ballots last year in the 2020 election, which was of tremendous concern. That was inexcusable and again showed the lack of professionalism, the lack of controls, the lack of operational understanding of what the process should be or could be.
Kind of sound like what we was talking about.
Right. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about some solutions maybe. Do you have ideas about how we could improve the boards of elections? And then we'll just chat for a bit on this, and we'll bring on our guest, Kate Doran, who is a League of Women Voters election specialist, and I think is going to have some great ideas for us as well. So what are some of your thoughts about Board of Election reform?
Yeah, I think it needs the same thing that that publicly traded companies use. You need some process improvement specialists to come in and talk to the subject matter experts to figure out what their processes are and try to figure out how to improve them. If I didn't do this for the last 20 years, I wouldn't recognize it. But it's the exact same exercise that you see in like manufacturing. There are principles that companies use to make their processes leaner, their whole methodologies around it. there's Six Sigma, there's 5S, there's Able, there's Lean. There are so many different process improvement exercises that you could use in government. Government just does not practice the same thing.
Do you want to just go into that a little bit? Because I hear you on a regular basis kind of like spouting these acronyms, and most of us who are not in process improvement or not in government actually have no idea what you're talking about. So break it down for us a little bit and then talk. Okay, let's start with that. Just what are these things?
Yeah, so there are concepts of process improvement that was started from the guy who created the Toyota manufacturing facility, and people in business use them every day, everywhere. And one of those principles is a 5S principle that basically there are like 8 types of waste, and the job is to get rid of all of the waste. So in my election commission, I see a person moving way too much. They move the paper over here, and then they move it over there, and then they lose count, and then they got to add a machine here. It is basically designed to station a workstation where when you move the paper to the next place, it's the next place it should be in, versus you just getting up and walking around and doing something. It makes the station have exactly what it needs so you can repeat the same processes the same time. And it doesn't matter who sits down, they will have to complete the same steps the same way, and they'll be able to because there's nothing else there for them to get off pace with.
And why is it called 5S?
There are 5 S's that give that concept.
What are the S's?
It's a 6S now, but those concepts they exist. They do, and they are really structured towards improving processes so you can eliminate waste. And there's just a lot of waste in government.
And how would we go about implementing that into the boards of elections? Because as you said, like this is all based on statute. Like in Tennessee, the statute says that the Republican legislators pick those county commissioners. They don't have any training mandated. Is it legislation? Would you have to change here in New York? We might have to change our state constitution to change some of this.
No.
What would you at least need legislation passed?
No. These are processes, right? I do this for companies already. Like when I go to my day job, when I was on the phone with you, I was going to do some Six Sigma for a company that's a nonprofit. These are when you look at a process like chain of custody, that's one big problem that we have, right? How do you complete a chain? And what is making that chain weak?
And
right?
for people who don't know, for people who may not know what chain of custody is the process by which we are sure that the ballots that were voted by the voters are actually the ballots that get counted and reported in the election results. We want to make sure that the blank ballots are all accounted for and the ballots that get voted are all accounted for, and they don't go into, they're not sort of in a room with one person by themselves where they could get changed, or they don't get lost in someone's trunk. Or
we don't end up with 135 of them getting counted with the real ones.
Test ballots. Right. In Liz Kruger's race, who's a state senator here, after her count, they found a lot of ballots from a district that she was strong in the ceiling tiles of the Board of Election. That's bad chain of custody because nobody was observing it and making sure that the ballots were observed and had strong oversight the entire way from being cast to being counted. So go back to chain of custody and how you could improve it.
Right. At its core, that is a process, right? The state legislature is going to say you have to have one. It's up to the administrator to create one. And that in and of itself is a process. So literally, not to plug myself, but I could go to an election commission and create a process for them. That would be airtight based on the legislature, based on the legislative intent of what's on the books already. How do you create a chain that is unbroken? You need someone who does process improvement to create a process like that.
I understand, but there would have to be somebody in place like the administrator who was interested in you doing that. And the administrator
that is correct.
Is also appointed by the same Republican legislators, and she is not interested in you doing that. She's right.
Yeah, I would think that they would want. Yeah, I think they want it. They just wouldn't want a Democrat doing it because it's because it's partisan that make you think that I would try to create some competitive edge because I know more about the process than you do. Right? It's the fact that it's not professional first that creates the problem.
So let's take a comment here. This is POV Philly. They're a great organization that works to improve elections in Philadelphia. And they're saying the problem, though, is when the people in charge don't have either the motivation or the competence to improve their own methods. There
That's spot
are
on.
solutions, but the board members, as we see in Philadelphia, are not motivated to adopt them. So I think what I'm asking, which is kind of a broader, sort of a deeper question, is how do you change the structure so that people who are interested in improving it are in charge? You would really need to change something structurally, I think.
I guess legislative, you would have to make the requirements, but it still be political. So I think if it was me and I could write the right legislation, I would completely make it nonpartisan.
Very interesting. Okay, and we're going
Completely
to
nonpartisan.
we have some a clip of some of the reformers who testified at the Board of Elections, several attorneys, and we're going to play that in a little bit. But the first thing I want to do is bring Kate on now because she's a just wonderful
Jumping at the
resource.
bit.
I can't say enough good things about Kate Doran. So let me bring her on and then I'll say a bunch of good things about her. Hi, Kate. It's so great to have you here with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
A delight to have you. So
Hi, Kate.
Kate is a election specialist with the League of Women Voters, and she has worked as a poll worker for, I think, 12 years or longer.
Longer than that. 12 years I worked as a poll site coordinator, but I'm back in harness as a poll site inspector in early voting now.
So how many years did you work as a poll worker or inspector?
From 2004 all the way through the presidential election 2016 and came back in 2019.
A lot of years. And then one of the other things that you're also kind of famous for is attending every single weekly Board of Election New York City meeting and taking really detailed, great notes and then sending them out to people. And what would you say is one of the main things that you've learned in terms of like all of that time that you've spent with the New York City Board of Elections? What would you say one of your main takeaways is?
That's a marvelous question. I would say my first takeaway is that they're human beings like the rest of us. I'm speaking of the 10 commissioners and this executive staff. They're flawed. They have their strengths. They're essentially well-intentioned, but they really want, the inertia is enormous. They want to do things the way they've always done them. They still living in many respects in the lever world. And what I mean by that is living back in the day when we voted on lever machines and we didn't vote on paper ballot. Now we vote on paper ballots. But the law hasn't caught up with the change, and the executive staff and the commissioners in most respects haven't caught up with those changes. So change is difficult. It's complicated. We need somebody like Bennie to help with processing all the change.
I think we do have a lot of people here in New York who are really interested in change. And like I said, we're going to hear from a couple reformers next. But one of the things I will say that I have experienced consistently with the Board of Elections, that even as a journalist, when I was just covering them and doing video of them and trying to report to the public, was very disturbing to me. There's a level of hostility. They're really kind of arrogant in their attitude. They are not welcoming when they get comments from the public. Do you want to just talk about their attitude and the tone that somehow has the culture of hostility that has developed there?
Well, it's sort of spotty. I would say that you are correct, but it's not true, I would say, across the board. And it is better than it used to be. My predecessor in the job of monitoring the Board of Elections told me that she was astonished about the way they treated her with hostility. Now they're more welcoming, but they're still reluctant. I mean, they believe they know what's best and they know how to administer the law, and they don't welcome suggestions, readily. But my takeaway is that they're human beings. They're flawed, and they need all the support and correction that they are willing to accept.
Right, and I know that that's one of the things I love about you, Kate, is that you're unrelentingly positive about. Otherwise, I don't know. I guess that's the way that you're managed to, to keep at it, is just by staying positive. I remember one of the times I was sort of kvetching about Michael Ryan. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear, but we have a big thunderstorm here happening. So this is the thunder in the background. But I was talking about Michael Ryan. The board had made another one of their flubs, and I thought, Michael Ryan should be fired. And you were like, he's actually pretty competent and way more competent than the executive director before him.
Oh my. Yes.
I think you do manage to have a positive attitude. But if you were going to make suggestions, and I have a feeling behind the scenes you do sometimes make suggestions, what would be, say, the top 3 suggestions that you would have in terms of really overhauling and getting us a better Board of Elections here in New York?
A better Board of Elections.
Better elections,
The board structure will require legislative and/or constitutional change. Right now, the Republicans can overrule the Democrats. There are 5 of each of them on the Board of Commissioners. That does not represent the voting public in New York City. There are only about 10% registered Republicans and 68 to 70% enrolled registered Democrats, but yet the decisions are made as though the things are equivalent. So really there's going to have to be some legislative or constitutional change. But I think smaller change in public, if you notice Jan Campopiano mentioned that public sees, this is where the public sees the Board of Elections on election day, their interactions with poll workers. We need to go on election day. We need to move toward the model that they've been using for early voting, which is you walk in any table, anytime. You don't have to remember which is your particular election district. You're served by a poll worker who will check you in if there's an extraordinary problem, like a common one that your name doesn't appear in the electronic poll book. Then you're taken to an expert who will handle that for you. And the hours are better for the poll workers. The hours are good, I believe, for the voters. And then we have to have much better training. We have to move toward a model where you can have a coordinator who is very well paid, and that coordinator trains with the people who are going to be working at his or her poll site.
Teams.
That's
team. Right. Teams.
Teams of people that would work together. That I think is a long way into the future, because right now everybody is trained separately. When I was a coordinator, the thing that was most distressing for me is I'm walking out of my house at 4:45 in the morning to get to my poll site at 5 a.m. I don't know who's going to be there. Some of the people I'm confident I will have known from previous elections, but in some cases I have no clue. I mean, can you imagine a basketball team or a baseball team and the coach has no idea who's going to show up on the at the game? It just boggles the mind. So, and I know that in the smaller counties upstate New York, they do train their poll worker employees as teams. We don't do anything like that in New York City.
Great. Great suggestion.
And we also have to go to split shifts. We cannot ask people to work a 17-hour day. But that goes back, one of the serious problems. Some of the objections that the board has to split shifts, I believe, can be, dismissed. But there is a serious issue about the chain of custody. They worry, and rightly so. The blank ballots arrive in the morning. They're handled by the poll workers. They're given to the voter. The voter votes them. They end up in the scanner, and at the end of the day, they're taken away by the police officers. That's a chain of custody that has to be addressed. And if you have completely different groups of people working at the beginning of the day from those that are working at the end of the day, I don't know how you handle that. Of course, you have to trust people. You have to expect that you have to know you're hiring honest people of integrity who are not going to engage in any mischief. But the chain of custody is the one argument about split shifts that I do understand. There are other arguments about people not showing up or it being too complicated to keep track of the number of hours people are working during the day. I think those can be dismissed pretty easily.
Yeah, I actually was speaking to Virginia Martin, who's a former election commissioner in Columbia County, about split shifts, and she said they did it there with no problem. And they had some people, herself, the commissioner, some of the inspectors were there for the whole shift. Some people have to stay the whole time, and they can keep track of chain of custody. They had meticulous chain of custody in Columbia County. They had it charted out. It was fantastic. And she said, really, split shifts was a dream because people were much more comfortable.
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry?
No, I'm just agreeing with you.
Yeah, so they were able to do it very easily there. I do want to push back a little bit about the vote centers model, which is what you're talking about, where basically you can go in and you can vote in multiple locations or any location. The one reservation that I have and that many election security and auditing advocates have about the vote centers is that it makes it very, very difficult to audit or to audit meaningfully because the ballots wind up all over the place. And so say you have a local race that's very close, like you had in CD22, or you have in some of like the district race that we just had to have a hand count for. If you have vote centers, you have to go and get those votes from all the different bins, basically. And I was actually talking through this with one of the reformers, David Siffert, who's an attorney who's writing 3 separate pieces of legislation to try to improve the boards of elections. I'm going to play a clip from him also. Terrific, just enthusiastic and forward-thinking individual. But we had a conversation with Dwight Shellman, who is the county manager in Colorado, and talked to him at length about vote centers and sort of the challenges. And they use vote centers there in Colorado, but they really never do hand counts. Their legislation is such that if the votes were counted by machine, they do a recount by machine. And that's not what we have here in New York. And so when you do those hand counts, all of the ballots have come back to the central location, but they're all going to be in these different bins, basically, based on the vote centers. And you're going to have to create spreadsheets that identify in each. You run through the machine and you identify on the spreadsheet all of the ballots from the district that you're trying to recount. And then you have to go and pull all of those ballots individually and get them all together to do your hand count. It's pretty cumbersome. And in Los Angeles, in Orange County, where they wanted to do a hand count, they wanted to do a recount of one race that was close. And they were the group was given an estimate that it was going to cost them $200,000 to do one local recount. And so they sued instead. So just some of these things have unintended consequences, and we really have to think through them. Bennie, do you have any thoughts about vote centers and the ability to audit meaningfully? Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's the current problem. I'm not a fan of vote centers for the same problem that we have with early voting. It is harder to audit. But again, if you start addressing the real issues, vote centers wouldn't seem as problematic if you had a secure chain of custody. If you know where, we should hire Chick-fil-A, right? Like, anybody drive by a Chick-fil-A, nobody's thinking that the people they're in the line are stupid. No. Chick-fil-A has managed their process, and they extended the way they manage a line to where all of its customers are okay with waiting in line long enough. So much so that everybody else had to change their drive-through windows. So, but nobody's mastered the line like Chick-fil-A, but that is a process that they chose to improve. So the same way you can have a bunch of people going into one place, if you have a place of sorting it and making it to where you can tag it so that it can be tracked, or there's a chain of custody around it, then you could probably do vote centers or any other process. I just think that one is just further down the road because of the process problems.
Fair enough. So let's listen to another clip. We're going to give you a break, Kate, and we're also going to pay some bills. And then we'll have you back at the end to answer any questions that people have, okay?
Come on back, Kate.
Okay. Okay, so the first thing that we just want to make sure that you're aware of is that we are fundraising every month. We are fundraising because every month we have to pay the bills. And so...
You have to eat Chick-fil-A.
Well, I'm not really eating Chick-fil-A. Are you eating Chick-fil-A, Benny?
It's a joke. I just said something about Chick-fil-A. We need money.
No, my favorite story that you have about Chick-fil-A is that is the most successful thing to send to people in a phishing email.
If you want to hack yes, a free Chick-fil-A coupon is the most used hacking phishing.
To get people to click on it and then
click on it.
Hack their computer. So,
because of the lines.
That's my favorite Chick-fil-A story. Okay, but things that we just need to cover. So our website, smartelections.us, and one of the really excellent things you can do to try to stay abreast of all the things that we're doing is sign up for our email list, which is there, easy to sign up on our website. And if you want to email us, you can email us. It is contact@smartelections.us. And I'm betting that we have that somewhere here. And you can also follow us on Twitter. Benny and I, we have our Twitter tags up here at Benny J. Smith and at Lulu Friesdat. And if you want to follow Smart Elections, we have that also. It is at @smart_elections. And we love it when you support us on social media. Not only do we have a Twitter channel, we also have Facebook, of course. You can like us on Facebook. You can share our photos on Instagram and our videos on TikTok. We're going to start putting a bunch more videos on TikTok, so keep an eye out for us there. And we are, one of the things that's really great is just if you can share any of the posts that we make, because you are our PR machine. We don't have a professional PR machine. It's up to you to forward our emails to your networks and let people know. Write to us at contact@smartelections.us. Tell us how much you really thought the forum was excellent and why. That helps us. We put those on our website in the testimonials. Or if you have concerns and you want improvements, you can also email us and let us know about that. But please do spread the word and let people know that you think that this work is really meaningful. And the other way that you can really support us is to either make a financial donation or to let someone who you know is interested in supporting good work know about our project, about Smart Elections, and to guide them toward our website, smartelections.us/donate, and let them know that you think the work we're doing is groundbreaking. There really is no other organization that is doing the same type of work that we're doing, that has the breadth of what we are doing in terms of really consistently, week in, week out, informing the public, following issues that really relate to our elections, improving our elections, doing public oversight of elections. And then also we have a sister organization, Smart Legislation, that is working on getting there down in the weeds and changing, the actual legislation. And that's a separate organization that we're going to have a website soon at smartlegislation.org. So basically, if you want to support us, please give as much as you can, and also send people who you think might be able to help us. Somebody actually just emailed me the other day the link to National Science Foundation grants, and that was so great. I really appreciate that. So any tips that you have like that. So let's go ahead and watch one more video. This is from people who are talking about ways that we can really improve the elections. And this is 3 different people who spoke. And some of their ideas I thought were really terrific, and they're of course moving forward with these ideas. I think these are things that are actually happening, which is one of the things that's really exciting. That people are introducing legislation, people are even thinking about other stuff, changing the constitution.
One of our key responsibilities is to work with the New York City Board of Elections to recruit poll workers and staff poll sites for early voting and election day. District leaders do not have a lot of power or influence as a rule, but there is a lot of influence when it comes to the Board of Elections. We have seen firsthand how this poll worker recruitment is used to pack the poll sites with friends and family. In the past 2 elections, we have heard and seen reports of toxic and inappropriate behavior from poll site coordinators, such as harassment, berating, and misinformation in the election process, disrespectful and inappropriate behavior from BOE trainers, lack of available trainings, and disturbing reports of the state of facilities used for trainings. We have also witnessed the larger failings of the election management, including the 2015-16 voter purge of over 100,000 voters many of them in Brooklyn, the 2018 and 2020 ballot scanner shortage that caused significant lines, and the 2020 absentee ballot fiasco to almost 100,000 Brooklyn voters, and more recently in the primary, failing to remove 135,000 test ballots. And during the COVID pandemic, we witnessed a huge surge in public interest to serve neighbors, fellow voters, by working the polls in the 2020 election. We heard over and over again the various poll sites in November about the positive influence of new energy, interest, and talent at the polls. We also heard from many of our constituents who received no communication from the Board of Elections after signing up as interested in working the polls. The problems that plague the system are structural. It lies in the archaic ways in which the organization conducts its business, appoints its leaders, and to an extent appoints election workers. It is a relic of Tammany Hall, Boss Tweed, and a patronage system that we know leads to corruption, inefficient practices, and voter suppression. It is also worth saying we hold the BOE commissioners and its leadership, local party bosses, and the state legislator directly responsible for the continued failings of the Board of Elections. The accountability for this embarrassment of how New York City and New York State elections are administered every cycle sits with the people who hold the power to change how the organization is structured and operates.
The New York City Board of Elections is an agency in serious need of reform, and state legislation, or even better, a constitutional amendment, are needed to take power away from political insiders and give it to a professional staff capable of administering elections for the people of New York City. The structure of the board is established in the state constitution. Article 2, Section 8 of the state constitution requires that the Board of Elections have a bipartisan composition. And according to the Constitution, these board members must be nominated by representatives of the parties. This means that commissioners have a dual role, with obligations to both the public as government officials and the local political parties. Given that all election administration decisions are made by the board, this dual role has detrimental implications. The bipartisan structure is based on the premise that since neither party could be trusted to be unbiased, an evenly divided board would ensure that the parties watch over each other and mischief is minimized. While this approach may have made sense in an era when political parties had traditionally taken the lead in administering elections, it doesn't make sense today. Obviously, given the difficulties of passing an amendment to New York's Constitution, it's worth examining what could be done either instead or while awaiting passage of the amendment. This would be a damage mitigation approach. And it would use legislation to strip away as much power from the city's Board of Elections commissioners as is legally possible under the Constitution, and give this power to the board's executive director and staff instead.
You talk to people inside the Board of Elections, they'll tell you all sorts of horror stories of dysfunction. I'll give you two really brief examples from what I've experienced. Last year when I was viewing absentee ballot counting, I spent about 6 hours at one of the sites. During those 6 hours, we counted 4 ballots because the procedures they were using was opening a ballot, scanning it, bringing it back, marking it up, going back, opening the next ballot, scanning the next ballot, and because of the line for the scanners, this took 6 hours to count 4 ballots. This causes concrete harms too. For example, last year we saw in the congressional race that in New York 22, I believe, that a seat was actually likely flipped as a result of the fact that the county BOE up there lost ballots. One thing that I hear over and over again, and you'll probably hear it today from other speakers, is accountability, professionalism, transparency, and voter centricity. But I'm a proceduralist. I study civil procedure, and so process and structure, I think, is something that really hasn't been addressed. And this process and structure, the patronage system that we have, is causing these negligent problems that in turn lead to really big concrete issues like losing a congressional seat. So in terms of accountability, one thing that I hear over and over again is the need for an elected chief administrator of an elections. So for states that have an elected secretary of state, they have much better results in terms of turnout and other metrics than states that don't have one. This can also be applied at the county level. For example, the executive director of the New York City Board of Elections could be an elected position.
So those are some pretty good ideas that we had. Let's get Kate back. Let's talk to her and get her response. So the ideas that we had there included, and you got some great shout outs there in the comments. I don't know if you saw, but people are like, Kate, wonderful presentation. And what these people are saying is truth. So we're definitely having some, some connectivity in the audience there. Some of the ideas that people were putting forward there include even a constitutional amendment. I think that's something you mentioned, legislation, if we don't want to go the full constitutional amendment route. And one of the things that David is working toward is actually electing a Secretary of State. Here in New York, we just have appointments and not elected leadership. What would you think about an elected Secretary of State, elected executive director positions?
Well, currently, as you know, the commissioners of the election in New York City are selected by the county leaders, the party leaders. And in most cases, those individuals are elected. So I'm not certain that going to an elected Secretary of State is going to necessarily solve the problem. I don't know.
When you say they're elected, you're saying the Democratic chair is elected, the Republican chair, the chair of the Republican Party.
The chair of the party leader in Brooklyn, for example, the Democratic Party leader in the County of Kings, Brooklyn, New York, is Rodneyce Bichet.
Yeah.
Thank you kindly.
She's my assembly member, so I know her.
She's an elected assembly member. So I mean,
she's not. But her being elected as an assembly member is different from her being the head of the Kings County Democratic Party, which is much more a position that she's gotten to by, working with the machine. And I mean, she's a great representative. I have nothing, but good things to say about Rodneyce Bichet. But I'm just saying, in terms of the politics, the heads of the political parties appointing the commissioners does seem to really emphasize that it's your political party that gets you the job, not your competence.
I understand that, but if we elect a Secretary of State, you'd have to elect
some party.
That person is going to be either a D or an R, right? And how do you get politics out of that? So I'm not certain. I can tell you that the League of Women Voters in New York State is taking this issue very, very seriously. And we're doing what we always do. We're going to research and study, which we did in the lead up to the selection of the optical scanners in the 2000s. And I believe we have the gold standard now in New York State, optical scan system. And the League of Women Voters was very much in support of that. And now we're undertaking a study of the structure of election administration in New York State. And it's going to take us a while, but our voice is valued by the powers that be. And we hope that we're going to come out with some really very specific recommendations.
We look forward to that. That's great. And I am excited to see, I have tremendous respect for you, and I'm really excited to see what the league comes up with. And I'm actually doing a teach-in with the league in October on Board of Election Reform. So hopefully I'll be part of that. I definitely have some ideas. I'm really interested in transparency. One of the things that I see over and over again is, and we did our Brooklyn Transparency Pilot Project, and I didn't play I spoke at the hearings also about the Brooklyn Transparency Pilot Project. I didn't play the clip because I think people here, we talked about it previously, and we'll be talking about it again, but we found very serious discrepancies in the polling, at least one of the polling places that we looked at, potentially almost 700 more ballots scanned than voters who checked in. And we had a very difficult time getting the data that we wanted. And there's a lot of points in the process that are not transparent, not enough. It's not easy enough to watch the audits. The poll tapes themselves are not often posted so that people can just take a photograph of them. Often the information, the results themselves are often not posted all the way down to the election district level, which is precincts in other states, but here they call it election districts. It's very hard sometimes just to get precinct level election data. And all of this is about transparency and about really having access. And we also are supporting another piece of legislation to make sure that digital ballot images, which are the photographs of the ballots, are available to the public and even just get put online automatically. So transparency is something that we're really in favor of. But we're excited to see your commission. And do you have any other sort of final words that you want to leave us with, Kate, in terms of upbeat, like words of encouragement? Or, I mean, we certainly respect your years of dedication to the election process. It's really admirable.
Well, be involved. Everyone out there who is a citizen and eligible to vote should register to vote and get out there and vote. I mean, even if you come into the poll site and you look at your ballot and you think it looks like a really difficult test, do your best. But engage. We need much greater voter participation in New York State, and I think that the pressure from the public, if they do vote and they do pay attention, it'll make a difference.
That's awesome. And we have another question for you. As long as you're talking about the League of Women Voters, we have been trying to get the League of Women Voters to take a position on the universal use of ballot marking devices or the hybrid voting machines that are coming into the state. Is there a chance that they're going to take a position on that? Do you know? Are you guys talking about it?
I can't answer that question. I do not know. We do not have a position. The questioner is correct. At the moment, we do not have a position. And I expect that we will at some point, but we do not at this moment.
Right. We encourage you, and we encourage you to take the right position, which is that hybrid voting machines are not considered secure by the experts and really need to be banned. And then look, we have another great response. The League of Women Vote study may motivate me to rejoin the League of Women Voters here. Terrific. Way to go.
Hey, way to go. Yes.
All right. Kate, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have you. And again, thank you so much for your service.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak to all of your viewers. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, Bennie, let's just take one more. I saw one other comment that I thought would be really
Kelly said I had a bad example. Hey, Kelly Lane. Chick-fil-A is a great example.
I wanted to take this from Mark. I think this is I wanted you to answer this. Would changing over to mail-in ballots solve the vote center problem, or would that create too many more headaches? Your position on mail-in?
It's still inventory. You still have to deal with the inventory. As long as you can track the chain of where it comes from, doesn't matter if it's a person or a piece of paper, you'll know where it came from. You just got to track it.
Right, but it's definitely still a concern in terms of auditing when you have those vote centers.
It's still auditing problem.
Right. Okay, so we got to a lot of the questions and comments. We really appreciate people putting them in the chat. We really appreciate people participating and coming on. This is a topic that's really, really important, Board of Election reform. And I really felt like I learned a lot, and we're really excited to have you with us. So we're going to wrap up. We're just a little bit 2 minutes over time, but keep in mind that this is what democracy looks like.
And we'll see you next week. Please sign up for our next session. That's in 2 weeks. That's the 24th of August.
We'll see you then. Thanks so much.
Good night, everybody.